So now I am really excited about this one. We mentioned earlier, and we talk about this all the time at the Underground, about ideas into action. We can have these conversations, but nothing matters unless we do something about it. So we at the Underground gathered a group of thought leaders to put together a working group to discuss generative AI and to ensure that credit union values are being integrated into what we're going to do as an industry. All right? It takes the diversity of thought with these people, with all of us, to ensure that we fight inherent and systemic bias that's already out there and put into place what we need to have for the future. We want to ensure that this tool supports our mission of people helping people. So I'm really excited to welcome to the stage Chad Ritchie, CIO from Ventura County Credit Union, to talk more about this initiative. Let's go.
Everyone. This next part wouldn't be possible without Sue's foresight. She looked ahead and saw generative AI and thought to get this group together. And her and George Estrada. George, are you still around? George, raise your hand. George is outside talking. They got together and found some industry leaders, and not just technologists, CXOs, CEOs, marketing people, to discuss generative AI and its impact on our industry and what we can do with this opportunity. But before I get into that, I want to take us back to 2007. In 2007, Steve Jobs walked up on a stage, held up a little black box, and said, "This is going to change everything." And we went, cool, that's awesome. None of us really understood what he meant by that at that time. We couldn't, right? A phone that you can carry around, that's great. Fast forward 16 years, and there are almost as many smartphones on the planet as there are people. It has transformed everything that we know. The way that we communicate with each other, the way that we do our business, everything has been transformed by this device. So, getting back to generative AI, it was in November of last year that OpenAI launched ChatGPT 3.5 to the world. Within 3 months, we had global adoption. 3 months. 16 years, we have almost as many smartphones as we have people. 3 months, we have everybody on the planet having some exposure to generative AI. It's an order of magnitude bigger than what Steve Jobs launched. This technology is significant. It's going to change everything in a way that we can't imagine. So, Sue had the foresight to get these folks together, and we formed a working group to talk about how this could impact our industry. And it's a fantastic group. If you're a part of the Generative AI work group, would you please stand up or raise your hand so you can be recognized? We have folks in the audience today that were part of this group. Thank you very much. Generative AI, I'm going to step back for just a second and talk about why this is such a pervasive technology. It generates, based on your prompts, whatever you want. Hey, please create content for my website so that I can talk about serving the underserved in my market. Hit return, 5 pages of content right there on your screen immediately. That's significant. Develop me some code so that I can have a new widget on my mobile app so I can transfer money. It will generate the code for you. This technology is so much unlike anything that we have ever seen before. So, to that end, this group got together and we put together a white paper that we're going to put out to the public, so I think in November. And the point of this white paper wasn't to prescribe a certain technology. It's not to talk about, do you want ChatGPT, or do you want Bard, or do you want Claude, or what does your tech stack need to look like? That wasn't the goal of this discussion. The goal of the discussion is we're all going to be forced to interact with this technology. And as the leaders of our organizations, what kind of questions do we ask when our staff come to us? How do we know how broad and deep this topic is? How do we have a framework for how to start the discussions around, can we use this? What's the risks? That's what this group focused on for several months. We had discussions after discussion about what we would want to put in this paper. And a couple of key things came out that I'm going to want to share with you today. But before I go into those specifics, we talked about everything from strategic implications to economic value to risk to governance to best practices. It's a 50-page document. It's comprehensive. It deals with a lot of things on how to have a conversation about generative AI and how it could take place. But I think the two most meaningful things that I took away, and I think the folks in the room who worked on the paper would probably agree, is the idea around culture and fear. The idea of culture is generative AI, every time you interact with it, it can give you a different answer to the same exact question. It's not like any technology we've ever seen before. In any other use case, if I have a piece of technology that does anything but what I specifically ask it to do, if it changes its answer, there's something wrong. I have to go and debug it. I have to figure out why it's doing this. Generative AI isn't like that. Every time you interact with it, it's going to get you a slightly different answer than you had the first time, slightly nuanced. Sometimes it can be wrong. It can hallucinate. How do we do that? How do we have a technology that is not always going to give you a consistent answer, potentially interacting with our members, with our staff? How do we know it's going to be effective? How do we know it's not going to do something that we don't approve of? It doesn't reflect our culture, our brand, our community. These were the kinds of things that we talked about in the working group. How do we train these models? Because they are trained. They're large language models. They're trained on huge data sets, and you can train these models on your culture, your ethics, your values. You can have it so that when they do interact with members, they're reflecting not just the credit union sense of community, but your specific brand. And how might you go about asking the right questions to make sure that when you do engage and decide to start testing generative AI, and it is potentially working with your members or working with your staff, that when it speaks, it's reflecting your brand, your value, your culture. Okay. What are some things that you can do around that? So that was a really interesting part of the working group. The other part of the working group, which I think was probably the most impactful, was this idea of fear. Am I going to lose my job to this technology? What's our staff going to say? Am I going to be replaced now that this thing can write all the website copy in 5 seconds? What happens to me? And it's an old saying that people are afraid of change. I don't believe that. I believe people are afraid of loss, and unclear change can potentially mean loss. So it's how we educate our staff on this technology. Technology is never going to replace a job. The thing that's going to replace a job is the people in this room, the stakeholders, the people who decide FTE next year. You're the ones that are going to say, yeah, we're going to let technology replace a job, or we're going to complement our staff. We're going to empower our staff. We're going to uplift our staff with this technology. It doesn't have to replace a job if we don't want it to. What it could do in terms of efficiency and attrition, because we do like the idea that this is a wonderful tool, it can help us be so efficient by helping. What we could do is look at, if you now have a 10% increase in FTE year over year, right? Maybe that drops down to 3%, because you're able to focus more on training your staff. You don't have to hire as deeply or as often as you've had in the past, because this technology will support you. Those were the kinds of things that we have been discussing with this white paper, and we're really excited for you all to read and give us your feedback. George Estrada would say we're in the middle of the hype cycle right now. I think he mentioned that earlier. And he's absolutely right. We are in the middle of the hype cycle, but this is going to become an operationalized piece of technology. We are going to use it. In 10, 20 years, we'll be using generative AI just like we're using our phones now. We won't even be thinking about it. It's how we make the decisions now on what we're going to do with it that's going to impact that future. So my call to you is read the white paper, give Sue your feedback, this is such an awesome thing that we were able to collect so many thought leaders from this industry to develop this thing. And if I know Sue, this is just the first step. She's going to going down this path. So with that, I will end on, do we think grim fairy tale for generative AI? Happily ever after? Hey, look at that. I love it. All right. Thank you, everyone.
Okay. Yeah, before you leave the stage, Kevin, if you'll walk this way for a second. One of the things that that he reinforced, that Chad reinforced, was the fact that this is going to happen quickly. And from our perspective, we want to have us thinking about it now, similar to what we should have done, if you will, with social media at some point, if we had that forethought. But the key thing is we're talking about the values built into the foundational models, right? We're not going to let our vendors create the foundational models without understanding credit union values. The cooperative system is too important for that. And before we move on, I'll get us a couple minutes here, but I wanted Kevin, he's part of the working group, and I just wanted you to add a comment, if you would, please.
Put me on the spot, so I would summarize the paper as this. The values are based on the members, mission, and margins. You like that? The membership and focusing on how they're going to get service going forward, I'm thinking we're going to have new products we've never even thought about. And I'm looking forward to that opportunity. The mission, credit unions were designed to serve those of modest means. Those of modest means don't typically have the assets that warrant one-on-one advice throughout their entire financial life. This technology provides something that they can put in their pocket to give them personalized, tailored advice based on their financial needs and current state and their goals. And then margins. Let's be really clear. The idea here in part is exactly what was mentioned, the ability to continue to scale up, absorb more work, and not have to add as many people to do so. That's going to be great for the bottom line, which allows you to invest back in the members and the mission. It's also going to be table stakes because our competition will be doing just that. Is that good enough? Yeah, it's great. Member, mission, margins.
Thank you. And I just want to say thank you, Chad, for taking the lead. Thank you again.
Thank you again. One more hand.